not this church, but a church, right? How many of you would fit in that category? Just as long as I've been like a human being, I remember coming to church. So some of you come in that category. And some of you have been a Christian for a long time, but not your entire life. How many would say I've been a Christian for a really long time, but not my entire life? Anyone? Okay. A couple of you out there. And some of you would say that you're pretty new to faith. And how many of you would say that you're relatively new to Christian faith? Like it's only been less than a year, a couple of years, a few. Yeah, a few of you. Good. I have a question for all of us. And the question that I have that you can turn to someone next to you and answer is this, is why do you stay a Christian? Why stay a Christian? What keeps you from maybe turning back to something else or back to what you used to be, or if you've been a Christian your whole life, it's not really turning back to what you used to be, it's turning to just like dropping the whole thing and just doing your own thing. What keeps you here? Maybe not just a church, but as a Christian, okay? So just turn to somebody and discuss that for a couple minutes ago.
My assurance is in heaven, all the words in heaven. And I know that this is just a resting place that always reminds us to
Thank you. I hope that was threw that on me last second. I've never heard this question before, but I hope that was insightful. Again, man, I wish I was able to hear all your answers. It is an important question. It's an important question of what keeps you here, because for some people, depends on how they're feeling, right? Like they're one day, it's like, I'm all here, and some other Sunday you might be 1 foot in, 1 foot out. We all, right, have certain expectations of how Christianity should be and what church should be, and for some people, and I would say even for most people, that Christianity doesn't always meet our expectations. Doesn't meet our expectations. And the key word here is the word expect, or expectations. Where do expectations come from? Where do they come from? I think that they come from our belief about what should be, right? They come from a worldview, a system of values and thoughts and ideas, and what church should be, what God should be. They also come from our desires, that I want X, Y, Z, and so my expectation is that church or God needs to fulfill my wants to a certain degree. And so some of us expect that maybe God, or the purpose of Christianity, is that God can make us comfortable. Some of us might expect that the purpose of Christianity is that God can make us more productive or more wealthy, right? Or be this kind of motivator for our lives. Some of us might expect that God is in this kind of exchange thing, where if we give him our belief, then he will provide for us and give us our desires, our wants, or fulfill our worldview. So, I want you to, however, imagine just for a second, is this how Christians have always thought? Or is this a uniquely Western idea about that we have expectations of church and expectations of God, and somehow those expectations have any merit or value at all? Let's think a little bit about the early church and what it was like, life was like for the earliest Christians. And I wonder if their expectations might have been actually really, really far, I would say that they are, far from what our expectations can be as American Christians, okay? So let's start with some context or some, setup of what life was like for early Christians. So, right, Jesus had come, and then he had left, he had descended into heaven, and Christianity had exploded in the Middle East, but not in power. In other words, Christianity was not accepted for early Christians. There was still a lot of hate going on towards Christians, a lot of persecution going on towards Christians. It was very difficult to be a Christian in the first century. It tended to, however, be accepted by those who were poor and oppressed. And so the people who were wealthy tended to reject Christians and Christianity. Now, eventually, Christianity made its way to Rome. We all know, of course, that one of the books of the Bible is written to one of the early churches in Rome, and that book is called Romans, right? Dear Romans in Rome who are Christians, I want to talk to you. That's what Paul wrote that about. And of course, Rome is the capital of this huge empire, the Roman Empire. And in fact, right, we see that Rome, being such a powerful presence in the world at the time, was the most powerful, was the superpower of the time. It was not only the seat of government, the seat of power, it also had the greatest military of that time and boasted the largest temple. And that temple was the temple to Jupiter, okay? And we're not talking about the planet, we're talking about the Roman god, Jupiter, okay? Most of the planets are named after Roman gods. Christians, however, were thought of with suspicion. Do you know why the people were suspicious of Christians, particularly the Jews and the Romans? It's because Christians talked about a king and a kingdom. Think about that. If you're a Roman, you're like, whoa, wait a second. You guys, we're going to put you on our watch list, right? Our terrorist watch list. You guys might be the ones who are trying to upend our empire with your king. So we're going to keep our eye on you. And in 64 AD, there was a man named Nero. Let me see if that's a little, the projector, right? There's an Emperor Nero. And in 64 AD, Rome suffered a citywide fire. The fire in 64 AD consumed 3/4 of the city of Rome and lasted for 6 days and 7 nights. Now, it is commonly believed, okay, commonly attributed to, this fire that is, to Nero himself, the emperor, that he was such a wicked man, he lit the fires himself for his own entertainment. In fact, that was commonly believed amongst the Romans themselves, and so they were bringing this up. And Nero said, well, I need to divert this attention from me. Let's pick on the Christians. And so he found some Christians. He basically, tortured them until they confessed that it was them, and there were other Christians, and eventually Christians were then targeted as the ones who lit these fires. Christians were then sought out, rounded up, tortured, killed in the most atrocious ways. We see Christians they put the hides of bloody animals on them and set wild dogs on them. Christians were nailed to crosses. Christians in Rome were set on fire. They, in fact, you probably know this, they were put on stakes, lit on fire to light up the city at night, and the Colosseum. The Roman Colosseum, one of the most famous structures in Rome, instead of football, it was feed Christians to lions. Okay, that was what was sport for the Romans at the time. Imagine what life would be like now for the earliest Christians. Imagine if you were to go to a neighboring village around Rome and visit with early Christians at that time who would be hiding in the barn in the back of the house with a few other Christian families, maybe a tiny church. And you go and you cower there in the darkness with them as the children cried and the men were just scared out of their wits. And as Nero's death squads would be searching home to home, looking for Christians to kill. Imagine what life would be like for them. What would you tell them on this side of history if you were to kind of go back in time? What would you tell them about Rome? You might say this about Rome. Rome is a lot different than what life is like for you right now as an early church. In fact, Rome today has crosses everywhere, but not like you think, because the crosses you see everywhere are filled with dead Christians. But the crosses you see today everywhere in Rome are on all the buildings. In fact, you will see crosses everywhere you look. You will see crosses not only on religious buildings, but on signposts and highways. You'll see crosses even in the same Colosseum where Christians were condemned to death. You will see not only crosses, but nobody in Rome worships Jupiter anymore. In fact, the temple to Jupiter, right, that no one worships there anymore. It's just more of a place to go and like learn about history. No one, not only in Rome, but throughout the entire world, not a single individual worships any of the Roman gods of the Roman pantheon. Right? No one's in fact worshipped them for centuries. The circus, Nero's circus, is not like Barnum and Bailey circus. It's the place where he would kill people, right? Nero's circus, where Christians were tortured and killed, is now a cathedral, right? They tore that down and now has been raised a cathedral named after St. Peter. The Roman Empire fell and has never recovered. But Christianity has dominated not only the city, not only this country, but has spread throughout the world. Imagine you speaking to this tired, fearful first Christians. What they look at you like you're crazy. What are you talking about? Don't you understand? Look at us. We're so small. There's just a handful of us. There's just a few dozen Christian families in our church. There's just a few, maybe a few small churches in our city in Rome, and a few small churches scattered throughout the world. What are you talking about? The Roman Empire spans continents, if they even knew what a continent was back then. What are you talking about? We're so little. And you look and you'd smile and say, oh, if you only knew. If you could only see what God can do with the small faith of the few. If what God can do, what he can do to grow and build that, as Jesus encouraged in his parable of the mustard seed, right? It's the smallest of all seeds, Jesus said in his parable. But it will grow. And you won't be able to know, even you don't know how it grows, but it does, and eventually it overtakes the garden. It's the largest of all vegetation in the garden. It's so large that even the birds from outside the garden will come and make its home in its branches. So, how did this happen? How did this Rome turning around and upending this empire happen with Christianity? It's mind-blowing how such a small persecuted group of Christians now is the largest religion in the world. How did that happen? Let me tell you how it didn't happen. Here's how it did not happen. It didn't happen because early Christians had the same expectations that we do. That's how it didn't happen, right? Our expectations are, well, I'll stay a Christian so long as it works out for me. I'll stay a Christian so long as I'm being fed. I'll be a Christian so long as pastor says things that make sense to me or that don't offend me. I'll stay a Christian so long as it's comfortable. See, that's what we do, but that's not what the first church did. The first church, even though it was so small, the first church took Jesus' teachings so thoroughly, so seriously, so completely, and so radically, that the identity for them was no longer their own, but the one that Jesus gave to them. They are no longer themselves. The Bible says that we are no longer ourselves, that we are bought with a price. We're bought and paid for by the blood of Jesus Christ. And over time, not immediately, but over time, they changed the world. The first church they wouldn't settle. Why on earth would we ever settle for church? Based on our expectations. Why would we do that? All right? So today I want to share with you the beginning of this message, the beginning of this grand transformation, this revolutionary message, right? This revolutionary movement of history, the most important and powerful movement in all history in Christianity. The top of the Roman Empire, and is still overturning kingdoms, overturning lives, overturning countries today, Christianity. It started with this revolutionary speech that absolutely changed the world, okay? Are you ready for this powerful, revolutionary, upending, country-changing speech? Ready? Here it starts. Here it goes. It's in Matthew chapter 5. All crowds. He went up to the mountain. So, right? That's why it's called the Sermon on the Mount. They're on a mountain. His disciples came to him, and then he began to teach them, saying, all right, here it is. You ready for this? This powerful, revolutionary speech. He began to teach them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. What? Seriously? Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the humble, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Hold up a minute, Jesus. Okay, so this is, several decades before Nero. This is when Jesus is still on earth. We're hearing him, we're like, just a second. Jesus, you're saying humility? Humble, right? How is humble going to get us anywhere in this life? How is humble going to get us respect and standing in front of the Jews that hate us? How is humble and humility going to get us any standing and progress in front of the Romans who have occupied our lands? How humble, what does that have to do with anything, God? Humble is for lower class. Status is for higher class. And if we want to get anywhere in the world with the Romans, we need some power. This humility talk, however, Jesus, I don't get it. Hold up a minute, Jesus. Peacemakers. You're calling us to be peacemakers, as it says in verse 9. How is being peacemakers going to get us our land back? We need to raise an army. We need to get the zealots together, the ones who are willing to take up the sword, because the way the world works is that it's violent. If we want to get anything back in our homeland, in this land of Israel, this promised land that God promised to us, we need to take it back by force. Jesus, what do you mean, blessed are the peacemakers? Do you know what happens to people who make peace with Rome? They get consumed. They just become one of the many forgotten people groups that Rome has simply brought into this one empire. Their identity is lost. We now are part of the Roman Empire. Verse 11, Jesus continues. He says, you are blessed when they insult you and persecute you and falsely say every kind of evil against you because of me. Be glad. Be glad. Be glad and rejoice, because your reward is great in heaven. For that is how they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Really, Jesus? What are you trying to tell us? How on earth is this character building exercise going to do anything in the world? This is the start of something new that Jesus is saying, right? The start of something different. How on earth are we going to make any difference in the world? So let's review, okay? That was kind of a lot. It was like a bunch of verses. Let's put it into one sentence here. Jesus, are you telling us this? That blessed are those who are poor, sad, right? Poor, sad, humble, righteous, merciful, pure, peacemaking, persecuted, and insulted people, waiting for a reward in heaven. Is that what we are, Jesus? Is that what we're supposed to be? That doesn't sound very appealing to me. This isn't the pep talk that I was looking for. And yet, Rome is gone. And yet, Jupiter is no longer worshipped. And yet, the kingdom and the empire has no more bearing and no more influence in history. And yet, the emperor is thought of as a joke, as mocked, as being a madman. Even the people who were lit up as beacons, their light still shines today. And the memory of the emperors of Rome is no more. Okay? Is this what we are to expect? Okay, Jesus says a lot here, right? He says a lot of blessings. So we're going to look as he continues on in his first message, right? Continue on to try to put this in very practical terms. And so the rest of our time we're going to look at these two word pictures that he uses to describe the purpose of this blessed, poor, sad, humble, righteous, merciful, pure, peacemaking, insulted people, right? What is the purpose? If we're to bear this kind of character, what is the end result that we're looking for? So he starts in verse 13. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt should lose its taste, how can it be made salty? It's no longer good for anything but to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. He starts off by saying, you are the salt of the earth. There's something to this blessedness, that even though you're going to bear and not take on the world's worldview and values of how to make it in the world, and the 7 steps towards, making friends and being influential in the world, this is not the same kind of leadership pep talk that you'd expect today. But instead he says this, you are the salt of the earth. Now the early Jews knew exactly what Jesus is talking about. What does salt do? What does salt do? It makes it tasty, but more than that. Jews knew the real value of salt. It made it preserved. It made things keep from spoiling, from rotting. When there's no preservative, no refrigeration, things quickly spoil. They stink. They rot. And salt that comes in contact with food over time changes the very nature, the chemical composition of what it touches, the food that it touches. And Jesus is saying to his audience, Jesus is saying to this audience today, and to us today, that you are not just the salt of the world, but you are in fact the preservative of the world. What is the purpose of the church? The purpose of his followers? Not to just come to church and say, meet my expectations, God. No, Jesus says, my expectations for you are far more than what your expectations are for you. That you are in fact the preservative of the world. If we don't preserve as Christians, the earth rots. I don't think he's talking about the physical earth. I think he's talking about something different. That the world in its relationships begin to spoil, that culture begins to stink, that powers and authorities degrade. If you don't preserve, then the world goes in a very dark and downward spiral. Imagine the world that Jesus lived in, right? He's speaking to this crowd in the Roman world, a world where might makes right. Morality and ethics don't matter to the Romans. It was their morality and ethics, and their morality and ethic was this: whoever had the biggest sword is the one who's right. Women had no rights. Children had less rights. Compassion, generosity were not virtues of the rich. They were values for the poor and the weak. It's a world that we can't imagine living in because we are so used to what Christian values have made Western life. Christian values and Christian Judeo values and worldview have so infiltrated and set the foundation for the world that we live in that it's hard for us to imagine what that world would be like. What we think of as common human decency, these common human ethics, were not common at all. In fact, there are many places still in the world that have not been based on Judeo-Christian ethics, and those common values aren't found. That power is found with the people who have rallied together and built their community around them. But we benefit so much from what Jesus taught and how those teachings have infiltrated modern Western world and transformed cultures around the world. We can't imagine a world where women are truly, that it is sanctioned in the maybe you can, I don't know. I wasn't raised Hmong, as you know. Some of you, do you know that? Wasn't raised Hmong, but maybe some of you who were raised Hmong might have seen a very traditional mindset where women were literally less than men. Right? That women to be kidnapped, that's okay. For men to hold power over women, that women, you go and, you do the kitchen thing and the men always eat first, and I don't know, right? Maybe you do know what I'm talking about. But this world of that women should be treated less than men, Christianity in the Western world bring this ethics, this ethic of justice to light, that the injustice of sexism, this injustice of, is brought to light. And today people are trying to make things right because of the way that we've made them wrong. Where does the idea of this is wrong come from? Right? Because there's so many cultures throughout history and so many cultures even today who don't believe that that's some kind of injustice. Oh, it's perfectly fine. Women are a lesser humans. Children are lesser humans. Intuitively, we know this, but it's not intuitively. It's been taught to us. It's been taught to us through a culture that's been based through Jesus' teachings. Intuitively, we know that a man should never own another human being. We know that human trafficking, right, is a terrible tragedy. It's an awful thing that's going on today. I skipped ahead here. The Super Bowl is, of course, right around the corner. Have you heard, you probably already know of this, that the Super Bowl tends to attract a lot of partiers and people with money, and very few, not everyone of course, but there's people who use their money for drugs, alcohol, and prostitution. And so, even talking with our resident cop yesterday, he was like, yeah, there's actually not a lot that they can do, because there's people with money who can get to places the cops can't. Jeff told me yesterday. John Choi, our Ramsey County attorney, said this about the Super Bowl. He says, the problem is in our community 365 days a year, every hour, every minute of the day. So even when the Super Bowl leaves, it's still going to be a problem. We can sit here and say, oh, how bad the Super Bowl is because of what it's going to bring. But the problem is that the church has not been as salty in our community, in our nation, as Jesus had intended it to be. Right? And when we're not preserving our culture, and when it's not infiltrating and changing the chemical composition of our culture and our people, it degrades. It degrades. How you think to yourself, how could anyone treat another human being that way? Right? I don't know. I just guess there's probably this, prostitution is probably going to happen thousands of times over the next week in our city. In our city. How could people do that? The reason why this is happening, the reason why people do that is because people do not see the world the same way you do. They haven't bought in that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. That they can find life in their own way. That humanity is meant to be used to please us, and not the other way around. That God has created us to bless others and preserve our culture. In the same message, Jesus teaches the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, right, who art in heaven, holy is your name. Jesus taught us to pray that God is a Father. He made him personal, a relational God, a loving God, not like Jupiter and the pantheons of other Roman gods who would toy and play with humanity. Like my son would play with, that sword that you guys gave us. He loves that sword. Right? that God values us. He accepts us as children. He accepts me as a son. He accepts you as a son or daughter as well. You have great value because you were made in the image of God. Even Jesus says that the way that people will know that you're my followers is how? Is how you what? Love one another. Your expectation from church, right? Sometimes our expectation from church is you come and I need to get. And Jesus says, no, you're missing it. You come into church so you can learn how to love. And then people will know that you're my followers. You are the salt. You're the preservers of this earth, Jesus says. And then he goes on. Verse 14. You are the light of the world. The salt of the earth, the light of the world. Back then, people rarely traveled more than a few dozen miles away from their town of birth. They certainly didn't know that North America existed, let alone probably anywhere past Rome. They didn't know that there would be churches in Puerto Rico and missionaries in Thailand. They didn't know that these places existed. And yet Jesus says, you are the light of the world, right? Light to a world and of the world that you don't even know existed, to a people that you can't even fathom. That your light will so shine and pass on and light lights beyond you. It says this, that my version says, you are the light of the world, a city situated on a hill. Maybe your ESV version says set on a hill. Or placed on a hill. That word situated or set is very intentional. It's meant to say, and when I say intentional, not intentional just with the author, but that it's a city that is put there on purpose. It is placed there very strategically. A city set on a hill. It's put there on a hill for a very specific purpose. And what's that purpose? So that it won't be hidden. It can't be hidden, so it's seen. No one lights a lamp, verse 15. Lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but rather on a lampstand, and it gives light for all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Okay? Listen, you say, man, I want to come to church, but I don't really want to talk about Jesus. I just want to go to church and feel nice about the whole thing and pray my prayer that I'm saved and daily bread thing, thank you Jesus, right? And make sure that we're all good. And then I go home and I just want to raise my family, and then when I die, I just want the heaven thing. That's my expectation of church. And Jesus says, come on, that is not what I'm teaching you. That is not what it means. That's not my expectation. My expectation for you is so much better than that. The city on a hill was made of these cities in Jerusalem were made out of limestone. It was a brilliant white. And as they cut these large stones, they would at night, they would they built these cities, and the lamps that would be on the outskirts of the city would reflect against the white brilliance of these white limestones. And people could see the city from miles away. It was so beautiful and brilliant and shining. The purpose of that was so that it would shine for the world to see. No one lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, but he sets it out on the lampstand for all to see. Right? Does it say this? It says, in the same way, light your light and shine. Let your light shine before others, so that others will see your church attendance and say, "Wow, what a great Christian he is." That's our expectation. Yeah. We come in on, look, let my light shine. Look how good a Christian I am. That is absolutely not what Jesus wants from us. He says, no, so that they will see your good works. Good works doesn't make you any more righteous before God. Christ has already done all the good work for us. And because of that, we then are free to do good works, not so that we can hold them to God and say, look at me, right? Look what I did. God doesn't care about look what I did. He cares about look what Jesus did. But he frees us. He gives us this freedom to go and do the good works. Because when we do the good works, others look at us and say, God must exist. How many of you have seen somebody else, or maybe you're here today because someone has loved you so much that God has become real to you. How many of you have come here today because you saw someone and they are generous beyond what you were raised with? They're giving beyond beyond what's comfortable with you, and man, those people are amazing, right? But they must get it from somewhere. And they have no reason, they're not like, oh, look at me, I am so great, but they point to Jesus. You know people like this. I look around, there are many of us here today who are doing that really well. And yet some of us still have this expectation of, oh, well, we'll wait for the good people to do the good things. Jesus is not like, no, well, I want you to live your life in a way so that when people see you, they say, right, how can somebody even be that generous? How can someone even be so nice? These are busy people, but they're so giving. They're some of the best people I know. They are tough, but they're loving. They are kind, but they are grounded in reality. They will go out of their way to make the world better for people who have nothing to give back to them and no reason to. And Jesus says, I want you to live your life in a way that is so different and so good that people begin to connect the dots. Not like, wow, that person's just really awesome. But they would say, wow, that person is awesome, and there's something motivating them. Something that has so filled them to overflowing. And I want it. And I want to see what that's like. And when some of us go on mission in a few weeks, in Puerto Rico. That's the encouragement that we've been receiving from our team. That we go wanting salvation for other people because we have received the goodness from God and it's just coming. And yes, we're not perfect, and yes, we've got our issues, and yes, we've got problems, and we're just... But you know what? God is bigger than those things. And we are yielding to Him to fill us to overflowing. May your light shine before others so that others see your good works. It just blows people away. Are you outshining the non-believers around you? Are you outshining the non-believers around you? Let me brag on just a couple of stories that I've heard this week. I'm going to point people out, so sorry I haven't asked you for this, but too late. Mary, last week, she's like, Chris, is it possible that we could go and pray for a friend of mine at work? She came to me over this week, and she knows I'm a Christian, and she has been experiencing some things in her home, and she wants to learn more about Christianity. I mean, there's more to that story. I hope I didn't mess that up. Mary's being a light. She didn't ask me to do this, so I know she's not like, yeah, look at my light. And I'm going to try to lift her up. I'm just saying, God is working in people in our midst. Kathy, she's downstairs, okay? she didn't ask me to do this, but I'm going to point her out. Kathy, the other day, it's a relative, like an in-law. Same thing came to her. You know, just the last person on earth you'd think would have any interest in faith, coming saying, I want to know. I want to know about God. God is working in our midst. When we are out there shining a light and doing good. And here's the thing, guys. So many times we're like, I don't know, this whole Christian thing, I don't think I'm influencing anybody. I don't think I'm doing anything good out in the world. Maybe I even try to do something good, and it's expensive, and it takes energy, and it takes time, and I don't see any fruit of our labors. And guess what? Some of that you will never see. You won't know. You don't know the end of the story until one day you're in heaven, and that person comes up to you and says, thank you for giving to God, because what you gave somehow was a light that lit a light that lit a light that lit my light. Maybe you don't know. That's for God to know. But God says, trust me. And maybe you feel like you're one of those people in the early church cowering in the barn. feeling like the world is oppressing you, feeling like you're in the darkness, wondering if there's any hope, that all you can see in front of you is death and persecution and oppression. And God says, no, let your light shine. Let your light shine. Be salt. Preserve this earth. There's a power in the seed. There's a power in the mustard seed that you're not going to see the end result one day, that it will fill the entire garden. Jesus says in the parable of the mustard seed. But you'll be part of that story. Because I've called you to be salt. I've called you to be light. You will change the world. I will change the world, Jesus says. But I'm inviting you into that story. Church, right? The early church, some of them died being salt and light. Some of them were persecuted and died. Hebrews 11 says this of them, that the world was not worthy of them. Go to Hebrews 11 and look at the story of a list of all people of faith and a list of people later on in the church who died because of persecution. There's a whole list of how they died, and it's gruesome. And the author of Hebrews, we don't know who that author is, the author of Hebrews says this, and the world was not worthy of them. We need to live a life so light and so salty that the world is not worthy of us. But not of our own power, because God says, I want to indwell in you. I want to be light in you, that it fills to overflow. Church, blessed are you. Blessed are those, right? Chapter 4, Matthew 4. Blessed are the poor. Why? Because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. Look at this list. The list of the promises. The kingdom of heaven is theirs. They'll be comforted. They'll be inheritors of the world, of the earth. They will be filled. They will be shown mercy. They will see God. They will be called sons of God. And the kingdom of heaven is theirs. And even when they're persecuted because of me, their reward will be great in heaven. We will have a reward great in heaven. So yes, the kingdom of God is an upside down kingdom. It looks so different from what the world says of be strong and take things on and make a name for yourself. And Christ says, no, blessed are the meek, the humble, the peacemakers. Because you're going to be an influence in the world beyond what you can do yourself and beyond what you can see. Amen.
Thy strength indeed is small, child of weakness, watch and pray, find in me thy all in all. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin
name is honored as holy. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And do not bring us into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Thine is the kingdom, power, glory forever and ever. Amen. God bless you. Have a great week.